This podcast was brought to you in association with Bloomsbury, India. Hello, and welcome back to yet another episode of the Kitabi Karwan podcast. We have with us today Tanushri Poddar, a prolific writer who's written one of the most interesting books I've read in recent times, a very light-hearted slice of life fiction centered around a very unique area, that is female officer trainees in the OTA, that is the Officer Training Academy centered in Chennai. It's titled The Girls in Green, and without any further ado, let's jump right to the interview.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of the Kitabi Parwan podcast. Today, we have with us Tanushri Poddar, the author of The Girls in Green. It's a fantastic book. I just finished reading it. It's such a light-hearted, funny book which leaves you with this fuzzy feeling in your heart at the end of it. So, without wasting any time, I really want to jump into this conversation. And Tanushri, I'll be honest, this was your first work that I've read. I haven't read anything by you earlier, but I did have an opportunity to actually talk to a bunch of people who have read your work, and all of them share this common review of your work that it's something that's really engaging and heartwarming. And yeah, so I just thought I'd pass that on to you before I begin the interview. So, Tanushri, something that I do on my podcast is ask authors. So, given the day and age we live in, authors are largely slightly public personalities. Way back, like say 20, 30 years ago, authors probably didn't enjoy this kind of fame. But today, when they are, you have your Instagrams, your Facebook, and a large chunk of your life is all made public. What would you like to tell your readers or like the listeners of this podcast about yourself that you probably, I don't know, in the best way possible, is not something that we can find out from the internet or from the blurb of your book?
Firstly, Siddharth, thank you very much for having me on your show, and I'm really thrilled to be here. Uh, yeah, you are right. We have to be more visible now than we were about 25, 30 years back. It's not something we all enjoy, but it's a mandatory process, it's a part of the professional requirements today to be visible on the social media, to interact with people. We did interact, but we interacted, personally once upon a time.
Right, right.
But now it's all over the digital medias and things like that. Uh, I don't know if there is anything that remains hidden from the reader about my life. I think most of it is out there. Uh,
Mhm.
I think one little thing that may or may not be known is that I'm quite a quirky personality with a vagabond kind of nature.
Okay.
So I like traveling. I don't like staying rooted in one place for long.
Oh,
Unfortunately, the pandemic has put my
yes.
state to rest for the time
Yeah.
being. But frankly, it's like I always say, it's something to do with my genes. My
Mhm.
father was a real avid traveler, and
Okay.
he, till the age of 80, he traveled, and I think he passed
Wow.
on the genes on to me.
Wow. That's something. I mean, yeah, especially like when it comes to terraneous places and stuff, it's very difficult for like someone who older they get. But that's very interesting. So I'm very curious, Tanushri. Like, so I went back and looked you up, and I saw a lot of your work deals with training around the military. Like, at least that's something that you've written about a bit. What was this particular bit like? Where is this like a childhood fascination, or is this I don't know, just something that came to you that you should probably write about?
Uh, you see, I think it's something to do with my growing up. My father wanted me to be a doctor, and the
Okay.
only thing I could think of was, I wasn't really interested. But then I told me if I get into AFMC, I
Mm,
will probably join medicine. Okay, AFMC
okay.
is the Army,
Right.
Armed Forces Military College, which is
Right.
in Pune,
Right.
and their intake is very, very restricted. They used to
Right.
have 100 boys and 20 girls at that time,
Oh, wow.
when
Oh, that's
the
less.
competition was very, very stiff.
Mm,
And So I knew that I'm not going to make it. Perhaps it also answers the first part of your question. Remember, you said something that is not very commonly known. It is this. So what happened is that I got through my initial writtens and all that, and
Right.
everyone congratulated me, almost sure that it was done, kind of a thing. Then I went for my second round, which is actually the final round, and they asked me very silly questions. Among them was something about Solzhenitsyn, the
Okay.
Alexander Solzhenitsyn book,
Right. Right.
and Dr. Zhivago.
Right.
So these were two things that I didn't know. Though I used to read so much, I
Right.
hadn't read Dr. Zhivago. And
Right.
you can
Okay.
imagine my frustration when I got rejected because I couldn't respond to,
Right.
some basic questions. But then, in a way, it was a good thing. And
Right.
my fascination, of course, led me to marry a defense officer.
Right.
So I am an army wife,
Right.
and somehow or the other, I felt that army was not very well represented in the media or books or even cinema. We had a
Right.
caricature kind of a thing which ran on similar lines.
Right.
Either they were about battles and the bravery and all those things. No one
Right.
talked about the fears and the emotions of the person who went to war or
Right.
battles, or the way they trained, what went psychologically, emotionally. And I felt that someone had to bring this stuff out, by writing about them.
Right.
And that sort of generated my books on these training, as you call them. They're not basically uh, so much about training, but they're very much about what the cadets go through
Right.
emotionally and mentally when they're going through such rigorous training.
Right. So, and I really agree with you. I mean, not that I have any personal experience with it, but because my family doesn't have a lot of army officers in it, but we did interact with people in the army once in a while. And I think this is a common grievance most people in the army would share, that they feel misrepresented, if it's the perfect word for it, or as you put it, caricatured in terms of how they represented across literature forms. But Tanushi, if I just can you pull you back to the fact that, given that you never went through these processes, right? And like, because you write about the time at the OTA in Chennai in your latest book, yeah, you've written about time at the NDA shared by cadets. So what was the process behind getting into this mindset, right? Because I mean, you were married to an army officer, and that might have given you a lot more insights into how an army officer thinks or behaves, or the emotions he or she, or like you were being an army wife, feel. But then, as someone who's been like who spent 5 years in a hostel, I think uh, like that experience is so difficult to even narrate back to someone. Like, I mean, you do have stories to tell people, but then the emotion of that camaraderie that comes by being in a place is a very different emotion. So and I feel that you sort of nailed it in your book, when you, at least this one, the one which I read, in terms of writing about how time spent together is actually all about. So what was the process like? Did you interview cadets? Did you I don't know, tour the places? Did you, I mean, how did you go about it?
Yeah, I actually went to OTA. I
Okay.
visited it a couple of times,
Right.
and I spoke to a whole lot of cadets as well as instructors. Went through the entire campus, checked out their training sites, how they stayed, their living arrangements. Then I went through. In fact, I had a meal at their canteen, which
Yeah.
is vastly mentioned there. Of course, it is not
Yeah.
like that, but there also I met a lot of cadets who were having their meals and enjoying themselves. And over a period of time, I could, sort of feel the kind of things to a large extent they went through. And I
Right.
think the rest you have to, let your imagination work. And as a writer, you need to have dollops of imagination, I guess. That's one
Yes, that's true.
prerequisite.
That's true. That's, and so like this dollops of imagination you talk about, and that's obviously like how writing as the process would have to work. And So what's your process like? I mean, in terms of writing, so there are these schools of thought, right? That there is that disciplinarian thought that I'll sit down from an X time to a Y time and write down, or just one of those I'll write with the flow thing. What works for you, like over the years, and has that changed over the years?
No, I've always been a kind of, pantser. I belong to the pantser category, who doesn't plan her books.
Right,
And, basically, my storyline changes while writing. Because the
right,
characters will take over, and sometimes I start with something, a different premise, and I land up somewhere else. That
right,
happens.
right,
And since there is no chapterization in the beginning, there's no, flow plan and all those things, like a lot of, the modern writers
hmm,
today, they make a flow chart and they work it out very systematically to the details.
right,
The chapters, break it into little parts and all that. I can't do
right,
all that. I can't think in that logical manner. I'm quite, like I said, I'm quite whimsical and quirky. So
right,
I think it's just one trait which I don't like about myself. I would rather be a very disciplined and, but I am a lazy writer. I
right,
have a very funny way of working.
right.
I can only work in the mornings.
Okay,
That happened because it was the mornings which were free for me when I
okay,
started writing. The
okay,
children going away, my husband going away, and I was
right,
alone. And so that continues today. And I devote the rest of my day
hmm,
to my personal joys and, reading, walking,
right,
interacting, all those things. So to a certain extent, I'm quite indisciplined. And
right.
over a period of time, I think what has changed is that I've become more laid back. Instead of being more ambitious, I've
that
become more.
that's the exact opposite of the lesson like you're told to learn during life, right? Like, I mean, you'll learn to go from being lazier to like this thing. But it's great to know that, and like that I personally, because I think it puts a very human face on writers, that you learn about how they process and how they go about things, because it just helps to know about, okay, that even one of the authors that you are appreciating has a different approach from what the world has put out there, and advocates for, and that works really well for her. And so that's, it's not a straight jacketed world for everyone else. But so Tanushri, if I could ask you something about your hobby. You mentioned that you read a lot, right? And that's something that I find a lot of writers doing, and that's great. Like, because I'm a huge bibliophile, so I'll never deride the art. But then, what got you into reading? And was there like ever a connection between reading and writing for you? Like, is that something that drove you towards writing, or were you always wanted to be a writer independent of the work that you write?
I must credit my mother for this
Right.
because she was a postgraduate in Hindi, and
Okay.
we are Bengali, which was very
Okay.
rare.
Oh wow.
Bengali being a postgraduate in
Yeah.
Hindi.
Yeah.
So, and she had this massive collection of books, and she used to love reading. So, I have read almost everything that, and our house was like full of books and magazines and newspaper and all reading material. So she is the one who inspired me to read, and I read, I think, very vastly in Hindi as well.
Mhm.
Mansarovar by Premchand and all those Munshi Premchand and all these Nirala and all these people, even Shivani.
Mhm.
She's a very, very good
Yes,
writer in
yes,
Hindi.
yes,
And we used to
yes.
get this Dharmyog and Hindustan, and my father used to get Illustrated Weekly, so, and even Bengali magazines. We had Desh and Navva Kollol and all those. So you won't believe I learned to read Bengali only because I was so interested in reading. So my
Mhm.
mom said, "You'll have to learn that language, don't you?" And
Right,
on my own, I pieced together the words very laboriously, and I started, reading. So I
right,
was such a mad, fanatic person, that anywhere I went, I was called very asocial, not, getting together with people, even, the relatives. I would just sneak to a corner, find a magazine or a book, and just go and, isolate myself.
right.
And to such an extent that when I was, even older, teenage and all that, every wrapper those days, the things used to come wrapped in newspaper or magazines and
Right,
all that. The
right,
packets
right,
were.
right,
I would
right,
open that and I would read. It was so, it's really crazy, but
right,
I just loved reading, and that continued.
right,
Every little time that I found went into my reading. And
right,
there, I think even today, when people ask me to give a tip to an aspiring author or whatever, I
right,
always tell them, read at least 100 books before you even plan to write a book, because that's so necessary.
right. Right. And first of all, like it's so glad happy to hear all these names again, because my mother herself is a voracious Hindi reader. So all the names that you mentioned, Munshi Premji and Shibani and everything, and she in fact penned a collection of short stories herself a couple of years back. So it just like gave me a flood of memories back. Like right now, she reads a lot in Hindi basically. But yeah, it's a very interesting thing that you mentioned, that most authors should read a lot more, right? And that actually brings me to a very interesting part that I wanted to talk to you about. So something that I noticed about your work is that uh, it's very well written, but in a very simple language, right? There is I don't know if it's a conscious effort on your part, but there is an avoidance of superfluous words, like mentioned in the narrative. So apart from the fact that, when you are using them ironically to make a point with your characters, like I do notice them here and there, but was this a conscious choice on your part to like make your work more accessible as an author, or was because so I'll tell you why I'm asking this question. There is this odd classes divide that exists, right? Where, and I think I've been guilty of propagating it myself a few years back, but wherein massy writers are generally derided for not being literary enough, right? And it just comes from a very elite place for people. So, was this a choice that you made, that your story, it's the narration is far more important than the way it's presented? That's why you'll choose to present it in a manner which is more accessible, or was it just like something that subconsciously is the way your style goes?
No, it's a very conscious decision,
Right,
because when I wrote my first book, which is Noor Jahan's Daughter,
right,
I did get a lot of feedbacks. A lot of people
okay,
told me it's very, flowery language or superfluous words, and we
okay,
have to sometimes sit with the dictionary to, decipher it and find
oh,
out what exactly it is. And then I realized somewhere down the line that that's not my intention.
right,
It breaks the flow of a story. If a person
right,
has to wonder where and how this word has to be, processed,
mm-hmm,
it interrupts everything and it doesn't do well for the author or the book. So
right,
I made very consciously to, I just made it that
mm-hmm,
way, that my language has to be simple, good enough
right,
for people to understand and
right,
enjoy. And
right,
actually, if you see, except for barring a few people who love to read, those kind of books which are very Shashi Tharoor kind, which are
mm-hmm,
very, they have a different language. Other than that, most
right,
Indians at least prefer to read something which they can easily read and
right,
visualize. The
right,
visualization comes only when you are able to understand each word.
right,
You
right,
cannot be looking at your dictionary or referring to something and then trying to visualize. It just
right,
doesn't work.
right,
So I am very conscious that there is a class of people which sort of looks down upon the people who are contemporary, what they call as commercial writers,
right.
as
No,
per the publisher.
and that's a very interesting take on it, right? I mean, I think that's where you get delve into this philosophical debate about the purpose of reading and why books exist in the first place, right? Particularly on the fiction side of things, as is what is more important, the story, or like the narration, or the fact that how is that story presented? And I personally like believe that the story is far more important than uh, the way it's narrated, because I think the charm of fiction books comes from the fact that non-fiction is meant to teach you things, or like just expand your scope knowledge, and it nourishes your brain. But fiction nourishes your mind, and that comes from the fact that, well, it's just well written narration, right? But Tanushi, I'll again try to just hoop back towards your reading habits. And I know it's a very cliched question, but given that your advice starts off with the fact that you'll advise writers to read at least 100 books before they start writing, I'll ask you a two-part question. The first one is, just if you could mention a few of your few books that have impacted you a lot during your life, right? I mean, not your these don't necessarily have to be your favorite books, but just books that hit you really hard or change your perspective on things. And the second one is, these might overlap, but then books that have really shaped the way you write, or have shaped you as a writer, or given you just some deep insight into how you should be approaching your art or craft.
The first part of the question is that, uh, I write in various genres. I read in various genres. So I wouldn't be able to tell you which is the book that impacted me most.
Right.
But yes, one book I remember reading when I was a child, my father had gifted a translation of Anand Math,
Oh, right, right,
which was in Hindi. It was
right,
translated in Hindi, and I read
right,
that.
right,
And I was about 11 that time,
right,
and it impacted me a lot because
right,
I started realizing what conditions people have fought under when the British rule was in India, going on in India,
right,
and how much they have sacrificed for the country. And perhaps that, sort of ingrained a kind of a patriotic feeling in me.
right,
And I think it impacted me hugely.
right,
And thereafter, of course, I've read many books. And like you say, there is a class of people who read a little different kind of books. I also read different kinds of books. I read all kinds. And
mm,
I feel that a story needs to be, understood by people. It has to reach as many people as possible.
right,
And that is my take on writing. So my story has to be told and it has to
right,
reach people. That's the
right,
simple logic of
right,
kind of writing that I do.
right. So, no, it's great that you mentioned Anand Math, because I personally haven't read it, but I've read. Uh, when I was growing up, Amar Chitra Kathas were the rage. I think among readers, at least younger readers, and I'm really thankful to Uncle Pai for like coming up with this idea, because I think it exposed uh, like this insane universe to a lot of Indian children. And yeah, so I remember reading the Anand Math's Amar Chitra Katha, right? And you're absolutely right. It's a very poignant tale of what people went through while fighting the Britishers. But then again, pivoting back to your writing, I mean, I get what you're trying to say about your writing, but then was there ever a author or a book that that influenced you to the way you write today, or like made you think a lot more about your work or the process, like going about the writing process?
No, I don't think so because I wanted to develop my own voice
Right.
and I don't want to be influenced by any other voice. But as far as, enjoying books is concerned, I have enjoyed P.G. Woodhouse a lot
Mm-hmm.
and I love reading humor. And I think whenever I'm feeling a little depressed or a little low, all I
Mm-hmm.
have to do is pick up one PGW, and I'm like, I just
Right.
find it irresistible.
Right.
So that way, yes, some of them have impacted me. But as a writer, I
Right.
don't know whether I consciously have been impacted by anyone. Maybe unconsciously or subconsciously, I don't know.
Right. Right. So, Tanshi, like I'll just pivot back to your book again. Uh, so it's very interesting to notice. I mean, first of all, it's a very unique book, because I think it's a very open take on how things work at the OTA, right? Uh, I've heard secondhand experiences from people, and they are largely in line with what you've written about. And so, firstly, like when you decided to go through this, and as you mentioned, you went to the OTA, and you spoke to a lot of people there. Did you ever face any resistance of sorts in terms of from the military in any way that that they would want to see a version of it before it goes out, or like, I don't know, did you receive any lash like backlash at it, this that uh maybe you showed them in a bad light or something? Because so here's the thing, like I remember when like Sinus was reading it, and particularly when I was reading about Ragda, or if I'm pronouncing it right, the exercises they make, the seniors make the
Yeah,
juniors do,
right.
right? So I mean, as much as I understood the reason behind it, the toughening up of the cadets and everything, at a certain point I did find it excessive, that it was something. I was thinking that, oh, thank God this didn't happen to me in my hostel, or this just seems inhuman. So I mean, so those kind of things, like, do you think, did you face any backlash of that sort, that maybe you're not portraying them in the correct light, or this might just put up a bad this thing? Because there is, it showcases a very particular side of the military, which a lot of people might agree with, a lot of people might just take a step back and get away from.
If you feel that this talks about Ragda, you should read Boots, Bills, Berets, which is
Hmm.
my first military book about the NDA.
Right.
The kind of punishments or Ragda that they used to go through, and this is, something which has been experienced by my husband. It has
Right.
been narrated by him. Many of the episodes are the true
Right.
episodes which happened there.
Right.
Then you say this is a very mild kind of actually.
Right.
And to be honest, it was true. It used to happen. Now, lately, after all those banning and all those things, it has toned down a bit. But as you also know, most of these colleges, especially medical colleges and all that, it goes on. It may not be permitted, it may be, banned, but it goes
Right.
on. You see
Right.
it in the movies, you know, you have
Right.
seen that one movie, what was that?
Three Idiots.
Idiots.
Yeah.
So it goes on. And yes, uh, we are just being truthful about what happens. I
Right.
have never faced any kind of resistance or any kind of,
Right.
kick off for that from the defense authorities. Firstly, because I am not employed by them, I am not a defense
Yeah, of
officer.
course. Of
Perhaps if
course.
I were, I would not be writing it during my service.
Right.
So, what you said that it has to be shown to them and all that is applicable. You have to take permissions, you have to show it to them and all that. If you are still serving in the army, and I think thereafter, after for a couple of years or something, but then
Right.
I don't fall into that, category.
Right. No, so my question was actually more along the lines of, so I completely get it, right? That obviously ragging is not eradicated from this country; it still exists, right? Whatever terminology you would want to use for it, but um, let me put it this way. So a lot of the things that the book talks about, like the camaraderie building or the competitiveness between the two hostels, Zilora and uh, Philora and the other one, yeah.
Closing.
So right, or like among the cadets there themselves, or the kind of encouragement they get to push forward with this culture, right? So there might be a voice which might actually come up and say that, well, this actually discourages younger people who are who believe in the ideals of the army but are not particularly sold on the idea of being tortured by their seniors, right? Or like day after night and those kind of things. So in that was a sense in which I was asking this question, that uh and but I'm glad to know that you mentioned that it's at least toned down in the army from after a point of for cadets after a point of time. But so let me ask you this: have you ever dreamt of I know, just going to the uh, training academy as a lady officer, like as an LC or lady cadet, and joining, or like was this something, I don't know, never on the picture apart from the
No, it
medical story?
wasn't. No, it wasn't, because at my time there were no LCs. This was
Right.
introduced much after I had passed out, and
Right.
much later.
Right.
But coming back to one part of your statement that it may discourage.
Right.
youngsters from joining the army.
Right.
Be very clear and honest about the whole profession is that this is a profession which is not meant for lily livered or weak need people. It is a
Right.
profession that requires a lot of determination, a lots and lots of hard work,
Right.
and you should be prepared to do everything and face everything. After all,
Right.
if you're going to be captured by a enemy soldier, he's not
Right.
going to let you off,
Right.
right? Don't feel pity. Okay, this man shouldn't be tortured, or you have to be toughened up. You have to know how to face all this. You have to be able to have that mental strength. All
Right.
this that happens, all that you go through in the academy gives you that mental strength. That
Right.
Neeraj, for instance, Neeraj Chopra, he is
Right.
credited discipline in the army. They
Right.
do great job in whichever
Right.
field they are, and that's
Right.
only because of the training.
Right.
Had they been lax during the training period, the instructors, they would never be the men they become or the women they become. And you read
Right.
so many stories of their valor and doing inhuman things, superhuman things rather. You know,
Right.
that won't have been possible at all. So somewhere down the line, we are doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the Indian Army wouldn't be one of the best in the world.
Right. No, no, I'm not, obviously that was not what I meant. But yeah, Tanushree, thank you so much for this conversation. This brings us to the end of our chat. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did, as much as I enjoyed reading your book. And for everyone who's listening, please go out there, go online and buy this book. It's a very light-hearted take and makes you feel fuzzy and warm and really brings out a very fun side of the army training that you'd want to see. So you can go order the Girls in Green on online. And thank you, Tanushri, for joining us today.
Thank you, Siddharth. It was lovely speaking to you. And I shared all my views very frankly.
Right.
So, means I have been on both sides. So I know what
Right.
goes on either side. Thank you
Right.
very much for bringing out a lot of points which
Yeah.
many people haven't.
Hmm. Thank you, Tanushri. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it, kindly like, share, and subscribe to our podcast across all platforms or the platform that you like. You can check out more of our work on Instagram at the rate Kitabi Karwan, where we do a lot of bookish things. If you're a bookworm, trust me, you'll love it. Do check us out.